Hey YEGnation, this is Austin Knop here. We'd like to welcome our first incumbent councillor we have here with the City Council, Mr. Mike Nickel. Thanks you very much for joining us.
No problem. Thanks for having me. Sure appreciate it.
So we'll start off. We've been talking for a little bit here, just a little bit in terms of offering a different opinion, being an incumbent on the City Council currently, as opposed to just candidates that are looking to run. Tell us a little bit about your history with the city, and if people aren't watching, don't know, a little bit about your background.
Oh my goodness, I was born and raised in Edmonton, grew up in Mill Woods. Our family's been in business in Edmonton since 1960. So you can do the math how long we've been around in construction mostly. Marble, granite, tile, masonry, and so now I'm a little bit retired. Because we did okay, and so now at the end of the day, it's my family has this belief: if you do well, you should do a little public service. So I'm in it, right, and living the life.
For sure. So again, as a current incumbent councillor, tell us a little bit about your history as in the Edmonton political scene.
Well, way back when, and this is before a lot of your viewers were born, I started a group called the Edmonton Stickmen, and I was a 30-something year old guy. The city, we felt, was heading down the wrong path. Got a bunch of friends together. Again, they were all 20-somethings and early 30-somethings, and we started a billboard campaign. We didn't have all the fancy media. We had old-fashioned Pattison billboards. And we started just asking some very hard questions on those billboards. At one point, for example, the City Council was talking about banning the Shriners from coming to Edmonton. And so we put up a billboard and we said, why does City Council want to ban Animal Acts? The answer, to be the only circus in town. So we always found that humor worked really well to get people's attention. And at the end of that election, we had a new mayor, and I think almost half of 3/4 of council flipped over. And it was just a campaign where a bunch of, we all put in $100. That was the game, right? You say, if you're not going to put in $100, you don't get to play. And I'll be honest, it all kind of started in a bar, but that's the honest truth. But and so we had a great impact on that. And that started my career, really. I was student union president at the university, and then I was councillor 2004 and 7, and got punted out. Iverson got in. And that was the greatest thing to ever happen to me, was to lose, because I got to work in China for 10 years, off and on with our businesses, and I came back with a real deep appreciation of how lucky we have it. So, and then I'm back on council. Yay!
So tell us a little bit about the current race here. Obviously, again, as an incumbent, you've got a bit of a different perspective than the people we've already been talking to. Give us a little bit of insight as to some things that are going on in council that you like, that there's maybe some things that you on your current campaign want to change, things like that.
Well, I'll tell you the truth here. There's a couple micro, micro to macro, right? Small to big. And if we start talking about some of the things I've done on council, I think it's not sexy, it's not fancy, it's not something you can crow about too much. But I finally got City Hall and City Administration to adopt a metrics target outcome approach to all our policy and programs. The firm belief is I believe in 3 things: accountability, transparency, and value for your taxes. Really, those things never change for downtown. Things may come and go, policies come and go, but you got to measure whether they're working or not. So you need to do that, and we weren't doing that down here. So we got that instituted, and that's starting to turn stuff over. And now we're starting to see where some of the warts are, and where some of the wins are. And so that led to greater transparency. I'm an incessant guy about retail. I door knock all the time. I think I've door knocked over 30,000 doors, if not more. And so, because I like it out in the constituency, so I focus a lot on the little stuff, the back alleys, the potholes, because that's what gets people the most out in the burbs, anyways. And then finally, if you want to talk about the workload we've carried in terms of successes, we've done over 3,500 constituency files. I've raised about $1 million for charity, for various charities, and so we've just been a really busy office. And so We have lots of situations in Ward 11. We have almost $1 billion worth, if not $1 billion worth of construction going on right now. And so the reason I came back was that I felt I couldn't leave those files half unfinished, because it takes a lot of experience. You got to know what you're doing. And so when you're overseeing, these projects, and you got to make sure you're getting performance.
For sure. So with that, I'd like to speak with you a little bit about our platform of YEGnation and how you can relate to that as a current city councillor. Again, if reinforcing here, our platform focuses more on the younger Edmonton community, the gender equality, and the cultural diversity here in Edmonton, which is what makes Edmonton so fantastic. We're sitting here. I mean, you take a quick look around here, you can see a pretty diverse community just right around us.
Well, you want to see diversity, come to Mill Woods. There's a lot of folks here that talk about diversity. Come down to Mill Woods. We walk the talk.
Yes.
And Mill Woods is it's been wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. I think I have over 109 different cultures in my ward. They're all great people. They're all hard-working people. And that's been the real joy of being the councillor, is working with those folks. And so down, Millwood, southeast Edmonton is not like any other place in the city. I mean, we have probably more diversity than I would argue than any other place in the city. And we make it work. It's because it's a community effort. It's the people who make it work. Yeah, City Hall, we have programs, we have ideas, we can provide support. But I will be honest about it. You got to have a champion in there at the street level. People actually buying into the idea that he's my neighbor, and he may be from India or China or wherever, South Africa, South America. It doesn't matter in Mill Woods, right? And that's the great thing about my part of the city. But the other side of the coin is one problem, macro problem I see, and you talk about youth getting involved. I see there's this gap. There's this huge gap between, my generation, right, which I was born, I'm 52, and people who are kind of that 35 and under demographic. And simply, where's the bridge between these two groups? Because one has a lot of can-do experience, right? But this other group is growing up with game-changing technologies and game-changing, the world has changed. It's not the same. I mean, when I was growing up, the Cold War was hot and heavy. There is no more Cold War. I mean, labels disable. I mean, I've been in China where I've seen Chinese communists, right? More free market than bankers on Wall Street. I mean, so it's a totally different world. And people need to get their head wrapped around that all these old labels don't matter. It's just, can you deliver? Can you fix my problem? That's what people are looking for.
Where do you see something from the young Edmonton community in terms of, not necessarily specifically in people, but in terms of technology, in terms of ideas? Where do you see a young and fresh Edmonton being reflected on council in terms of maybe projects that you think would help revitalize the city?
Oh, there's so much low-hanging fruit. I don't even know where to start. I mean, I'm a manufacturer by training. Just simple, basic applications of app technology and so on can be doing so much more, and we can be adding so much more value to the corporation, thereby to the tax dollar. But eventually, right around the corner, let's face it, autonomous vehicles, AI and robotics, something I'm quite tuned into, is going to be a game changer for the city, and we're going to have an employment gap now, right? There's going to be a whole generation of older people that won't be able to are not in touch with these new technologies that are coming out of the manufacturing center. I can't imagine how it's going to change the service sector and so on. I mean, go to New York, right? For example, they don't have a lot of places, they've gotten rid of waitresses and waiters. You just order on an app and they bring you your food and then you pay with your credit card. I mean, that's game changing in terms of the labor force. So if there's a place for the youth, they got to bring that stuff forward. They got to put those ideas out there. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? That's what's playing now. And then the question is, can we apply it? Can we commoditize it? Can we move it? And that's where the can-do side needs to come and understand that piece there. We got to do it together, because you know what? I'll tell you, we're competing globally. We're not just competing for Canada or even with the United States. I've been all over the world, and to be quite frank, we got to get our act together fast.
For sure. Well, Edmonton's got a great, again, a melting pot of people and also technology. And I mean, we're a fantastic city. I've been in and around Edmonton my whole life. I've spent a lot of time in Mill Woods. I currently live in the Laurel area, and I lived in Mill Woods, so
you know what I'm talking
I know exactly
about,
what
right?
you mean.
It's like we don't. Yeah, it's just the way it is, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And people, it's a hidden gem. It really is. You go into those neighborhoods, they talk about mature trees and all that sort of stuff. Well, we got them in Millwoods in spades. You should see some of the stuff we got. But, I don't want to drive too many people in there because then they'll drive up land values. And then people's taxes will go up.
Absolutely, exactly. So with that here, being a councillor in the ward, what kind of common things have you been hearing from constituents that they like or don't like about Ward 11 specifically? And
the real challenge is that what's starting to emerge here in Edmonton. I was just talking to somebody about it this morning. Is that the suburbs and the downtown, there seems to be a growing divide between what they want in the suburbs and what's coming out of downtown. When I go to a door and they say, we put ping pong tables on Jasper Ave, they kind of go, say what? They're kind of going like, what are you doing, right? And the farther you get away from the core, they just see these downtown things not making sense to them. And that seems to be a bit of a problem, a bit of a bridge issue. And I'll tell you, we did a survey. We sent out survey cards to all of our constituents, and I got about 500-600 cards back. And the top 3 issues: municipal taxes and spending, more police on the street, not in a helicopter, right? And infrastructure. They want their stuff fixed, like their back alleys. And then, but what you hear from downtown sometimes has nothing to do with that. So if you go to my website, you can see the results from that survey. And you will see a lot of things that we've been talking about recently are kind of in the middle of the pack.
Interesting. So that's cool. That's cool to see the perspective again as a councillor. You've got a little bit of a different perspective than some other people we've been talking to, and that's interesting. Again, as somebody who spent a lot of time in Mill Woods, it's interesting to hear you say that.
They're different creatures.
Yeah, 100%.
Very different creatures, and so it's that balancing act that needs to be brought back. I think it's really important because there's a disconnection that's growing, and it's not a good one.
For sure. What's kept you in and around Edmonton all these years?
I'll tell you, there was a time I wanted to move to Chicago or Hong Kong. I had the option to go run the offices, and my wife kept me here because she didn't want to move, and it was a good decision, right? If I was a young person, what is young though, right? But if I was like 30 and under, I'd say, what are you doing here? You need to travel a bit. You need to see what's going on in Asia. It's like the Wild West over there. You need to see what's going on in South America. Now, there's places in the world I'd recommend you not to go, right? Because they're kind of scary places. But once you see them, you come back with an appreciation of how ridiculously rich, how ridiculously lucky we are as a city. We're an island in a storm, right? And I just came back and I just said, how fortunate we were, doing that China, India, Indonesia run for so long. I just said, wow, and I encourage people to travel as much as possible, just so you can understand. And it's good for you, it's good for the business, it just opens your options, especially your eyes.
Absolutely. The very last question that I'd like to touch on here, again, I'm 23, I've never voted.
You've never voted?
I know. That's the whole point of doing this is YEGnation. So, and the whole thing is that I am not an anomaly in my community.
Demographic,
so, exactly. In my demographic, that is not an anomaly. So why again, you've got a lot of experience in over a large period of time in terms of why voting matters. Why do you feel? What do you feel is the most important reason to vote?
Well, it goes back to when I was student union president at the U of A. It was the same sort of apathy question, right? I said it hasn't changed really, and that was back in the 80s. And I keep saying to people, if you don't step up, then you can't complain. You got to be there, right? But you also have to be. You just can't be voting for skateboard parks. This is a much more complicated problem in front of you than just more skateboard parks and having more festivals. We got the hardcore mechanics that have to be delivered on, and And so you have to get, I know they're boring, or they're drab or whatever, but it's part of the business, right? Of actually making a city work.
Absolutely. Well, as they say, that's adulting, right?
Oh, jeez, I'm sorry. Have you just like labeled me?
No, that's okay.
We have a saying, labels disable.
Labels do disable. Well, again, Mike, thank you so much for coming out and meeting with us here. It's awesome. Do not forget to vote, guys. October 16th, Monday, 2017, coming up soon here. We're not even just under a month away. So that's exactly.
Can't be over soon enough.
We'll talk soon, YEGnation.
Okay.
That's fantastic.